Not sure if everyone knows. There you go, the recording. Not sure if everyone knows, these meet and greets are a series of events that the Global Network for Popular Transportation has been carried out for a while. And this year we've been doing them jointly with the PRISM Consortium, which Ariana will tell us a bit more about. That's a project supported by the Volvo Research and Educational Foundations and led by Columbia University Climate School. And so we're collaborating to learn more about popular transport in different contexts around the world. And so every 2 months, we're having a meet and greet with one of the living labs that is doing research in different places. So we can learn about what they're doing, what they're finding. Popular transport is very context specific. So in some places, we'll be talking about bike taxis. In other places, we're talking about minibus taxis. In other places, we're talking about e-rickshaws. So it's really, really rich to learn from each of these different contexts so that we can have shared knowledge and get insights from how things are being done in different places around the world. So we're really excited to have the San Jose Living Lab with us today. And we're going to talk about what the research that they're doing. But I'm going to first give some space to Ariana Salas, who is part of the PRISM Consortium and will tell us a bit about what it's about and how we can all collaborate to learn more about popular transport. The floor is yours, Ariana.
Great. Thank you, Andrea, and very nice to see all of you. My name is Ariana Salas Castillo. I am a postdoc at the Center for Sustainable Urban Development here at Columbia University, and I am luckily part of PRISM, which stands for Partnership for Research on Informal and Shared Mobility. And I just wanted to explain very briefly what PRISM is. It is, as Andrea mentioned, a global consortium, and it counts as partners universities, research institutions, civil society organizations in the global south. It is based, the concept of working is based on living labs, and there are living labs in Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. There are 7 living labs in the global south working on 8 different cities, and we are very happy today to have one living lab participating, the Living Lab of San Jose. I will share on the chat the website of PRISM in case you want to get more information, but I will also post the email in case you have any questions or you have some ideas for collaboration. This is a topic very understudied, and it's amazing that this partnership can create more collaboration and networks around this. So looking forward to the presentation, and yeah, I'll post it in the chat box.
Thank you, Ariana. And just also to remind you, we've already done several meet and greets with other living labs, and you can find those recordings and all that information in the PRISM website. And for this year, we have one presentation left, which is with the Bangkok Living Lab. So if you want to learn a bit more about what popular transport looks like and what's the learnings that are happening in Bangkok, we're going to have that one on December 12th. So keep your eyes open. We're going to be promoting it in social media and in our newsletter. But yeah, I just realized that maybe some of you might not know what the Global Network for Popular Transportation is. You might have heard about the event via PRISM, but just in case, our network is essentially a platform where different people around the world can connect to learn more about popular transport, to share insights, knowledge. We have a newsletter, we have a LinkedIn group, we do convenings and events where we share the latest knowledge on popular transport with the vision of creating a world where popular transport is recognized, it's integrated, and it's part of the transport ecosystem so that it's strengthened and it has a good quality that can serve people in a dignified way. So very, very happy to connect to you all. But the idea today is to not hear about us, but hear about the San Jose Living Lab. So I'm going to introduce Arturo and Elena, who are part of the team in the Center for Urban Sustainability, Centro para la Sostenibilidad Urbana. And I think today is going to be a conversation. Sometimes we have presentations. Today is going to be a bit more of a conversation. I'm going to be interviewing them a bit more, and then we can have spaces for questions as well from you. And then we're going to do some breakout groups so that we can discuss about the key insights or the things that resonate with you based on your experiences and context and what you're learning from this experience. So for now, the idea also of these meet and greets is that we can also meet each other. So if in the chat you can post your name, where you're based, what's your interest in popular transportation, we can start knowing that. And then in the breakout groups, we can go a bit deeper. So Elena and Arturo, please introduce yourselves, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about the Center for Urban Sustainability and the work you do in Costa Rica.
Elena, if you want, you can go first.
Okay, sure. And good morning. Hello, everyone. Hope you are doing well. My name is Elena Campos, and I'm part of the research team here in Costa Rica. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you. And my name is Arturo Steinfeld Alvarez. I'm the Sustainable Mobility Coordinator at the Centro para la Sostenibilidad Urbana, or Center for Urban Sustainability. And we are an NGO that basically try to accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy and try to see sustainability beyond being green, as we say on a usual basis. And we work mainly through climate action, sustainable mobility, and inclusiveness in cities as well. So we try to link those three aspects of or areas of work in what we do on a daily basis and in all of our projects. So basically, we do that either through research and development, which is what we're doing now with alongside Prism. We're doing also consultancies or providing services and advisory as another way to do our activities, sensitizing and capacity building, and finally something that we call social action, things that we like to promote, but we do that with our own resources and not necessarily through consolidated or commercial projects, to put it in some kind of way. So that's basically what we at the Centro para la Sostenibilidad Urbana, or CPSU, it's much easier. That's what we
do. And just going into kind of the work with area that you're researching in popular transportation. Popular transportation is in different places around the world, and in different places in the country as well. But you chose a specific place. Please tell us a bit more about why Pavas, which is the place that you're doing the research on, and why it felt like an interesting place to do this research on popular transportation.
Perfect. Let me bring up a presentation that we used in the last few days, just so you can also have a quick look at what Pavas is. These are the two types of public transport popular transport services that we're taking a look at. And as you see, it's either automobiles, like via door-to-door travel, and also minibuses, which are part of the vehicles that are being used. And here's my cat also. Why Pavas, or at least why are we doing this research in Costa Rica? We know that this services exist for as long that communities have existed. They've been in use for a long time, but they have never really attracted any attention. And in this community that we're studying, which is called Pavas, that's the district of Pavas as itself. And as you can see, it's quite mixed from the size of the roofs. In the picture, you can see that it's sometimes either very high density, taking a look at the sites more to the left of the screen, a bit less dense when it comes to more higher income housing, when it comes to the right, quite close to the airport, and then a bit of a more mixed environment when it comes to the southern part of Pavas, which also has a significant industrial area where you can see the white roofs in the bottom of the screen, the bottom right of the screen. So why Pavas? Pavas is the largest district when it comes to territory in the city of San Jose. It's almost a fifth, a bit more than a fifth of the whole city area. And then it also has the largest population within the city of San Jose. with as well a bit over a fifth of the population. And it's very dense, as you could see from the picture that we just showed you. And it has that diversity or that contrast between socioeconomic realities. Really low income parts and the higher income parts and communities living quite close to each other. And also, why PAVAS? Because it also has at least one unsatisfied basic need, according to our statistical service. And not only migrant status. And there's a significant part of the population which wasn't born in PAUS. And that's something that we wanted to take into account to see what and how do these people move and for what, and all those kind of things that we're trying to answer through our research piece. So that's basically part of the context of why we chose this community and why we're doing this, because in the end, nothing has been documented, even though everyone knows that these kind of services exist. Elena, I'm not sure if you want to say something else.
Yeah, maybe say that here in Costa Rica, there are not a lot of research about popular transport besides the one that Andrea did in the Caribbean side of the country. So it's really important to start to have this conversation about the contributions that public transport have in the transportation system, but in urban areas. So that is another thing to take into account for this research. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks. And I think that that can lead us to one of the questions that I wanted to pose with you which is, a lot of the times when we talk about popular transportation, there's a notion that popular transportation only emerges when there's no other alternatives, when there's no mass transit system, when there's no government provided public transport system. But from what I understand and what you've shared in other spaces, this is not the case for PAVAS. So can you give us a bit of context on how the popular transport services and the public transport network kind of coexist in this area, and why you feel that popular transport is serving a role and what the role is?
Okay, as you can see from this picture on the right, all the reddish lines, I'm not exactly sure what color that is, I'm not that great. Those are the regulated public transport services. And as you can see, they pretty much cover most of the extension of PAVAS, of the PAVAS district. And in the hashed line, that's the train service that runs only during peak times, but it's another service that another public transport service that is available for the population. And still, you can see in the green and yellow dots that perhaps you might not see them as well as I can. Those are the stops. You see that there's a lot of stops. There's quite a good coverage for the network. There's the possibility of interconnecting bus services with train services. But as Andrea was mentioning, there are still popular transport services that pretty much provide a different kind of access and some uncovered parts or services within the area. And why is that? All these bus services start at let's say at the end point, well, start at the start point from the community and go to San Jose city center. They don't necessarily do any services around the community or connect different neighborhoods. So that's a reason why we see that these services, the popular transport services, exist, because they can provide access within PAVAS and not necessarily from PAVAS to San Jose. And that's what we see with the collective cabs or the more door-to-door travel. When we see the minibuses provide a faster service for people that need to get to San Jose at a certain time. and that they don't want to be stopping in every single stop that you can see in the green and yellow pairs. So that's another reason that people have mentioned why they use popular transport to go to San Jose or to move within Pavas as such. And in Costa Rica, there's the at least a bit derogatory term of calling them pirates, since they are stealing demand from public transport. But that's something that we're trying to understand. What would people that provide these kind of services would like to be called instead of using that term, which is it has been used for a long time, but no one really ever asked them if they felt comfortable with that term.
Do they call themselves anything in specific? Do you know if they have a name for themselves?
We still haven't been able to talk exactly to the providers, because Pavas, as you saw with all the contrasts that surround the community, there's also a lot of violence within the community. So we're trying to take baby steps to be able to talk to the people that provide the services without getting into any conflict with them during our research. So far we haven't had any luck, but hopefully in the next few months we'll be able to talk to them about this.
Super. And I think that's a good segue to talk a little bit about the methodologies, how you're collecting the data, how you're approaching the communities, who you're talking with, so that other people around the world can learn a bit from this if they want to do similar research there too.
Okay, let me look for the slide. Okay, here you can see also that public transport services pretty much connect every important site or end use for travel. For example, the green dots are parks and plazas. The fuchsia, I think it is, are sports facilities. Then we have blue educational centers in bright bluish, health centers, and all those kind of things. So you can see basically bus services do connect, bus and train services do connect all these types of important facilities within the community. So as Andrea was saying, why do this service, the popular transport services, still exist? And as I explained to you, it was a bit more on the connectiveness within the community, like intra-district connectiveness, and also faster travel when it comes to traveling to San Jose, because the bus basically does around 30 to 35 stops per service. So it's quite a lot for people that are in a hurry, and there are still not any direct or express services so far, which could be part of the public transport side of the solution, or trying to integrate those two between popular and public transport services. This is our methodology. We're doing a bit of everything, to be honest. We started out with a workshop with different stakeholders, mainly on the public institutional side. We met with the municipality of San Jose, with the city government. We met with the Public Transport Board, which is in charge of approving and designing the public transport services for the whole country. Then we also included the metropolitan, well, the city police officers. We had presence of two academic institutions, the University of Costa Rica and also the Technological Institute of Costa Rica, which have been very active in this, in cooperating with us to get to deploy some of the information that we need, as I'm going to comment in a bit. And we had some base questions from what we wanted to ask or to find out based on research that we had studied before. For example, the one that Elena mentioned from Andrea in the Caribbean coast, but also from other research that had been done in the region of Latin America, but also at a global level. And from there, we started talking with these institutions to see what else they wanted to find out. And basically, with that, we confirmed or we validated the research questions that we're trying to answer through either desk research or field work. In field work, we have done several things, and we're in the process of doing other observations, which I think our colleague Carla Quesada is leading this part of the field work, and I think she's today either on site or she was yesterday with Elena on site, and you can tell us a little bit more, Elena, about this. And finally, the interinstitutional work with the University of Costa Rica, that we're trying to create a GTFS file for the whole service, the regulated public transport service in Pavas, because Costa Rica doesn't currently have the information available information available to the users of public transport or to the citizenship in general. So that's something that we wanted to add now that we're doing this research, just to contribute to popular and public transport services in general. Elena, if you want to comment a little bit more on the field work that we're doing, please.
Yeah, so yesterday we were doing some field observations in different popular transport stops that we already have identified where these services are working. And we visited, for example, a bus station in between San Jose and Pavas. And now we were talking about the official public transport. There's an interesting finding that actually, well, we did these observations in peak hour. So we saw that, for example, that there is a lot of official buses at this time, and that actually people tend to use more this kind of service rather than the popular transport. So that was interesting to see, but also we visited more inside of the community, the part of more like the one that Arturo was showing you at the beginning. And we were watching like the dynamics in front of a health center, for example. And there we saw that there's a very quick dynamic where the public transport just drop off people. And I think that something important to say is that I think that the principal users of this mode of transport are women, and I think it's very linked to the care dynamics that we have also identified in different interviews, that people use these services in order to go to medical centers or to go with their children to other places. And yeah, we still have another observations to do, and we are planning to make it in also peak hours, but in other times frames of the day, and in different parts of San Jose, in the route from San Jose to Pavas, but also Pavas to San Jose.
Thank you, Elena. And that's basically our methodology so far, Andrea. I'm not sure if there's any other thing related to the methodology that you would like us to go a bit deeper in.
Yeah, I wanted to connect with one of the questions that we received from Roger in the chat on I know you're doing observations and that you're collecting data on like the types of vehicles and the number of vehicles. Roger was asking if do you have any idea of like how many minibuses and how many collective cabs are operating in the area, or if this is something that you're starting to build within the community or the stakeholders you've talked to around numbers in the sector.
So far, no, let's say there's nothing official at the moment, but from the workshop that we did with the institutions and the conversation that we had with the public transport operator, they were registering license plates at some point. And especially for the minibuses, which are the ones that are easier to identify in some kind of way rather than the automobiles, because they share several the same characteristics, and they basically look a lot like this. Like most of the minibuses that we see are either this model or very similar. And as you can see, this one doesn't have a license plate. So, and from that mapping that the public transport company did, they said there were around 50 minibuses that they had written down the license plates. From what we're seeing on site, we did an observation in the beginning of this month, trying to compare in one of the routes of the bus routes here on this side, let's say more to the side of San Jose than to the side of Pavas. This is a secondary. This is not the main route. The main route goes through what it says RN 104. We were doing it. We were doing another exercise here on this side, which is a boulevard, but it also has a public transport service, and pretty much they had the same number of buses running on popular transport services than the public transport services. We accounted for around 15 to 17 buses per hour in this corridor. We're still trying to do the observation on the main corridor because, of course, probably there will be more buses, both popular and public transport services within this corridor. But that's something that we will be doing in the next few days. As for the taxis or the more door-to-door travel, that's something that there's not a lot of information yet. And another thing that they mentioned during one of the interviews to our colleague Carla was that they tend not to travel all the way to San Jose City Center because perhaps there might be police officers that could take their license plates away because the vehicle that they're using tends to be older and not necessarily updated or up to date with every single permit that they need to be able to use their vehicle on a public road. So they might be operating not only in a non-regulated way when it comes to public transport service, but also in a non-regulated way when it comes to complying with traffic laws in the country.
Actually, that also, I think, could connect with the other question that we had from Roger in terms of if the demand is more intra-community or for destinations in San Jose. And I'm wondering if there's a difference in the role between the collective cabs and the minibuses, that the minibuses might go more to San Jose and the collective cabs might just do like more community, intra-community services. But yeah, maybe you can expand on that.
Okay, again, from what we've heard from the community so far, the collective cabs, as you can see here, are more used. Well, they are more versatile, and they can either do let's say intra-district service, or they can go up to, let's say, from Lomas, which is this area around here, to Pavas Center, or they can go from Lomas all the way to San Jose City Center, but it's a more flexible service. Minibuses tend to replicate the public bus routes in general. And again, as Elena was mentioning before, a lot of the collective cabs or the more door-to-door travel tends to be within the community and tends to be used by women on care tasks in general. And I think that we look for the results that we had here. There's again some of the different comments from stakeholders that say, okay, it's in general risky, it has a link with drug trafficking, it's a service highly used by vulnerable populations, etc. So if we take a look, and these are pictures from the workshop that we had, and let me go quickly. But yeah, we have seen that here they are. Why do they use them? Or which is the main mode that they use? The popular transport, let's say the collective cab or the door-to-door travel. And you can see the minibus is not that far away from what we've been able to solved so far. And these shopping labors and care work are basically related to household activities. So those are also important. We're going to try eventually, when we get more data, to cross these two and to see what kind of vehicle or service they are using to do what kind of activity as well. And people use it several times a week, so it's a service that they use often, which is another important finding, that it's a systemic failure in the system. It's not something only that people use from time to time, but they do use it several times a week. They just stand on the street, and they know basically where they can take it. So it's a more learned attitude towards how to use the service, rather than relying on other types of modes of access. And why do they use it? Faster travel and flexibility and higher frequency of trips, which is kind of related also to the faster travel. So that's basically what we're having as part of our results so far. And we asked also, what would you do if you wanted to improve the service? And people would say improving service conditions, because the driving is a bit risky since they're operating outside of what is permitted. They would have to operate in a faster way to avoid police officers, for example. They would like public transport to be the regulated public transport to be faster, for example, less stops and that kind of things. People would leave it the same, again, because they do feel that it's a useful service, but perhaps that's something that we're trying to get more answers to our survey. We only have 20 so far, but we're trying to test different methods of reaching out to the people without raising any red flags with the operators as well, since again, since there's that violent atmosphere related to the service, we don't want to get into the wrong let's say, mess up with the wrong people. And that's something that we're trying to do with the interview of operators, which is something that we have pending so far.
Yeah, I imagine there's some information that's still missing from their perspective. But I was wondering if you had been able to identify, for example, how they define their tariffs and how it compares to the public transport tariffs, and also how they organize, if they are organized at all.
Yeah, that's part of what we're trying to do with, through this method of collecting information with the operators themselves. So far, we don't really know how exactly do they organize, or whether they define the tariffs together, or what do they do. But from what we've seen, tariffs are a bit higher than what they are for the public transport service. For example, public transport service, if I'm not mistaken, right now it's 385 colones, which is about 60 cents, 70 cents of a dollar. And popular transport services normally charge around, let's say the minibuses, charge around 600 colones from what we've heard. I'm not sure, Elena, if you heard differently yesterday that you were doing the observations.
No, I think it's like you're saying.
Okay, 600 colones might be around
Exactly.
120 when it comes to US dollars. So in the end, we see that it's almost twice as much, but that doesn't really how can I say it? That doesn't really make people not use the service just because of the price. Because as you saw here, they were using it because it was faster, not necessarily because it was better priced. The ones that might be more, let's say, or less different when it comes to pricing are the taxis or the door-to-door travel, because Costa Rica also has regulated taxi services, which account for several operating costs, including the operator or the driver itself. And that sometimes tends to bring up the taxi tariff a little bit more than what people would like to pay. So I think, or from experience, what we've seen is the collective taxis still operate as minibuses, just with less space. Only 4 people can travel. So sometimes that might be even faster than waiting for 12 people or 16 people to come into the minibus. But when it comes to door-to-door travel, and especially since those are more local trips, and sometimes taxi services don't really want to go into several communities in the area, those door-to-door travel tend to be a bit more competitive with taxi service as the taxi tariffs than the minibus tariffs are with the official or the regulated bus service. So I think I answered some of the questions, but I'm not exactly sure if I got everything.
No, you're good. We have a really interesting question here from Hussein around climate challenges. Now that we're seeing a lot of climate impacts in the cities, he was wondering if, considering that these operators are not necessarily recognized by the governments, how are they how are people depending on them or impacted during extreme climate events like heat waves or floods? And if you know if there's any provisions in the city government around resilience to address these vulnerabilities.
From what we've heard, and we did another project related to this community, the main risks are flooding and urban heat. Urban heat doesn't really get a lot of attention in general in the country. It's starting to build up, but there are no specific studies from what we've seen or what we've identified so far for this community. And in Costa Rica in general, temperatures haven't been as extreme as in other countries or as in other cities. So that's something that as a whole in the country, we have an opportunity to dive a bit deeper in that part. When it comes to flooding in Costa Rica, it rains a lot and there's not a lot of infrastructure, or the infrastructure is a bit outdated compared to the intensity of the rains and the amount of days that it rains in the year. But in general, from what we've heard in the community, it's still something that hasn't been as critical in this community as such, but there are difficulties when it comes to infrastructure in general, whether it's road or whether it's drainage. So those are the main problems that they might have, but they are not so far been as critical as in other communities in the country and in other communities in the city. So when it comes to climate risks, yes, there are. I would say they are still in the medium scale rather than the high risk scale. But at the same time, it's something that we need more information in order to give a more precise answer, and that information is not yet available. And as you can see, there might also be risks of landslides. These are, let's say, the green lines that you see around, those are rivers. So the communities are very close to the rivers and not necessarily in the best building practices available. So those are also risks that we haven't heard in news or in any other report that there have been catastrophes related to landslides so far. Hopefully there aren't, but at the same time, again, the risk exists within the region.
Thanks so much. I love how we're able to cross over to other different topics such as climate adaptation and vulnerability, because these types of services cover populations that are vulnerable in so many different ways, and sometimes if there's certain climate impacts, maybe a big bus will not be able to reach a community, but a smaller car or a 3-wheeler or a 2-wheeler will. So that's a very, very interesting intersection. Thanks for raising it, Hussein. Cami was asking about the business models. And this is really interesting because one of the double-edged elements that popular transport usually has is that flexibility and agility and how it gets places faster. But it also involves a road safety concern because sometimes the business models are very much based on trying to get as many passengers as possible and going really fast to collect more passengers and to compete between different operators. And that generates some concerns for people when they're riding these services. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about how this works, if you've seen if they compete with each other, and are they owners of their vehicles? So just how the business models work and how this connects to maybe the experience of users as well when they're using these services.
Okay. Again, we haven't really been able to talk in depth with the operators themselves, but from what we've heard through other stakeholders, there are several things. First of all, as you can see, those road safety related risks do exist, and people mention them, have mentioned them through the interviews that we have done with other stakeholders. Here you can see on the mid-right comment that they are not insured. Sometimes they're not even roadworthiness approved, and all those kind of vehicle-related risks that are themselves one of the parts, and then the driver behavior is another factor when it comes to this. We have heard from both the public bus operator and the city government that they are organized, and that they do have, for example, people checking in different parts of the route if there are police officers, if there's a failure with the public transport service, so they can send more vehicles to pick up people. So from what we see, that organization might avoid competition within different bus operators, popular minibus operators. And another thing that you can see here when it comes to in the top right comment, since there's that part with drug trafficking and violence in the area, sometimes they even have to pay a fee to be able to operate within that area. And that functions kind of like the authority within that area without being exactly an authority. But it's that part that violence tends to restrict or to constrain how they operate and who do they have to talk to. But that's something that we've heard from other stakeholders. We're still yet to confirm it with the operators if they are going to talk about that kind of thing. But yeah, that's what we're seeing. In the end, people operate all their vehicles, so all their vehicles tend to be both costly to operate and to maintain, and also cheap to acquire. So it's a balance of what they're offering. They're not necessarily focused on a extremely high quality service when it comes to comfort and all those kind of factors, but they apparently provide a high quality service when it comes to speed of travel. So sometimes that's what's more valued for some people, for some types of travel, than comfort or other aspects. So again, we're still trying to get a hold of how to talk to especially minibus operators. We've had some conversations with door-to-door travel operators, but yeah, so far I think that's mainly what we've seen. Elena, I'm not sure if you were able to talk about or to get more information about this yesterday.
Yeah, actually, from what we saw yesterday, I could say, well, this still has to be confirmed, but I wouldn't say that they compete between them because, for example, if there is a car waiting for clients in a bus stop, the other cars won't stop there. So they kind of respect that space of the operators. And I think that that's also because it's a very familiar environment, so they know each other. Because we saw that, for example, the cars pass by and they say hello between them, for example, and they just go on. So I wouldn't say that they compete, but yeah, we still have to have these interviews with them and to understand better the behavior.
Super, thanks. One of the things you mentioned before, which I thought was really interesting, was that the existing data that's out there is not in the hands of the decision makers or the authorities. Rather, it's in the hand of the public service companies, the bus companies. And I think this connects a bit with what Roger is asking here, is what does the authority, what's the role of the authorities here? You've talked to them, you've gotten insights there. Are they strongly regulating? Are they kind of ignoring? What's their position there, and their kind of point of view of these services and the future of them?
I would say they're cautious, and that's the approach that they're taking. They don't want to get into any kind of trouble, and they don't have any information to be able to take any action as well. So they're not, let's say, they don't want to create conflict in an area that is violent and that has already had problems with, let's say, between public bus operators and popular transport operators in the past. And what they do is they basically block the access to certain areas, and they fight police officers and all those kind of rioting activities that you can see when any interest is messed with. But at the same time, they want to find out more information to understand why they are, let's say, why do these services exist and what can be done from the public bus operators point of view to be able to, I wouldn't say eradicate, but to satisfy the needs of the people through the public bus options that they might have. They do understand that popular transport services are there because of a reason, and because they do provide access to people that might not have it otherwise. I think with part of the information that we want to highlight is they are also providing jobs to people that probably otherwise wouldn't be able to have a job or to be able to have an income, and that might leave them even more vulnerable than what they are already. And that's something that I think might be highlighted more for popular transport worldwide, that it's a relatively, transport in general might be a relatively low barrier job opportunity than other jobs that might require either more education or more specific knowledge. But at the same time, when you look at that in vulnerable transport, vulnerable conditions populations, then it becomes even more important to provide those kind of low barrier jobs in general, and less specific or knowledge types of jobs, because in the end, they are vulnerable populations and they might not even have finished school. They might be migrants, which don't really, which are even more difficult for the, it's even more difficult for them to have jobs and all that kind of things, that I think the authorities in general would like to have more information to act, rather than to act in a more repressive way, because from what they've seen through other examples and through other conflicts that they might have had with regulated taxis or at some point, or with other bus services in other communities, they don't want to create conflict in an area that is, yeah, it might be, let's say, popular transport services might be satisfying the needs of certain demands, but at the same time, both are coexisting somehow within the area, and they just choose them for different reasons, perhaps.
And in terms of a bus company, maybe you also had conversations with them. How do they view them? Do they feel they're really impacting their business, or what's their position on that as well?
Elena, if you want, you can start this question since you were more in touch with Virgilio initially, but I can complement afterwards.
Yeah, from what we talked with him, the operations manager of the official bus company, he told us that they have like issues with these kind of services because, for example, they have crashed their buses, and when there is this kind of incidents, they can call the official police because their conditions are illegal, so they tend to just run away and take no responsibility about these issues. And another aspect is that, the bus company said that they are having, for example, financial issues maybe. And for example, the buses are not in a good condition, so the people prefer to use the popular transport because, it's faster, and the government technically is not providing a good public transport. So it's kind of a difficult situation. And they are, for that, they are not having like a good, I don't know how to say this, like a good demand of passengers. And then they have to rise their fare, and it's like a circle, like the whole program. Maybe Arturo, I don't know if you want to complement.
Yeah, and also another thing that he mentioned was that even though they are in competition with them and they have had their difficulties, they do see the value that popular buses or minibuses really provide to certain communities that don't really have a service after certain times, or that they might not be the safest communities even for the public bus operators to operate in. So they do see the value that is out there from popular transport services, but at the same time, as Elena was mentioning, they have had their encounters with them that haven't been very favorable for the public bus operators.
Thanks so much for those insights. I'm gonna add one last question from the chat, and then I'm actually gonna open it up to other people who might have additional questions now, but I have another last one before that. So Cami was asking if you know if there's a high share of popular transport also operating in areas with higher car ownership, if that data is available, because I know sometimes it's not, but if you have any insights on that.
I wouldn't say that it's available since, as we mentioned before in the beginning of the presentation, there's very few information from popular transport services in Costa Rica in general. Although there are always, you can see in every community, the minibuses, the same minibuses that we see in Pavas, we can see it in pretty much every community, whether lower income or higher income. They tend to be less frequent, probably in higher income communities, since there are less trips to cover for a higher share of the population. For example, if everyone has a vehicle and they can take it pretty much whenever they want, there will be less people from residential areas that are going out of their houses to cover that demand, but they might be covering that demand of the people that are coming into the communities. For example, domestic services or construction services or those kind of things. So I think in general, there are popular transport services in pretty much all of the country. They haven't been documented and they haven't been crossed with vehicle ownership or types of trips that they are covering. But in my observations, nothing documented either. But from what we see on the streets, they do exist. They do provide services to areas where the vehicle ownership might be high, but they are providing it to other types of users that come into the areas and not necessarily people that are in need from that community specifically to go out to other areas.
And I think that point you're making is really essential, because sometimes we think about just the people who are living in an area, especially if it's a higher income area, but there's an entire workforce that comes to and fro, and that sometimes is not well served by government provided public transport services. So I think that's something that really needs highlighting in terms of the accessibility that's being provided by these transport modes and for whom it's being provided. Before opening the floor a bit more and also going into the breakout group so we can talk to each other as well, I wanted to ask, I know this is an ongoing investigation and that the project is longer term and you still haven't been able to talk to all the stakeholders, but maybe from the information you have until now, how do you think a coexistence between the popular transport and the government provided services could happen? Because we like kind of the narrative that we're trying to place and the things that we're trying to envision is, how can we really understand this as part of a transport ecosystem, and how could decision makers and authorities start thinking about how to integrate these so that they can work with each other rather than compete with each other? So based on the insights you have on the type of trips, the users, the times of day, and how these work, how do you think could be an optimized version of the ecosystem where these two work, or if they shouldn't? Just leaving it out there.
Elena, I'm not sure if you want to answer first, because mine is a much more philosophical and the overall answer.
I'm thinking yet, so go ahead.
Okay. I would say as you can see, there are different types of services. And in the end, diversity is good. And the diversity in offer of services is always good. There are considerations that are complicated. For example, quality costs. Then if you want to provide real or at least decent living conditions for people, you have to have something like a safety net for them, and those safety nets cost in the end. So if you want drivers to do whatever they want whenever they want, that's an option, yes, but that tends to leave the drivers and the users in a more vulnerable way than if you really want to have certain criteria met, that they are insured, that they are operating vehicles that are of a certain quality. So all those kind of regulations, in the end, you have to put them in a balance. And there are people that need certain types of transport services because they need them right now, and that costs in the end. And so it's difficult to see a world in general where popular transport services don't exist. And for example, in Costa Rica, Uber and Didi and all those ride-hailing apps in the end are popular transport services because they don't fall within the legal status of things, but they are not popular transport services themselves because they don't really, let's say, how can I say it? They are not really born from the communities and from the needs of the community. They are basically coming from a multinational company that has been funded by venture capitalists, and it's a much less difficult environment to work in than what we see with popular transport services, but they are both in those gray or red prohibited areas of the country when it comes to legal terms. So they will coexist, I think, and that coexistence might be conflictive or not. But also, I think another thing that we see from this is that public transport services need to improve, and they need to provide flexibility, and they need to provide different types of services as well. For example, if you're seeing people that need faster travel from their communities to make connections in San Jose City Center, then they might have express services. They might cost a little bit more, but they could cover a lot of the demand that needs to get there on time because they need to connect to a bus that might not be as often or as frequent as the buses in Pavas. So those kind of things, I think, could improve the quality of public transport services, but perhaps affecting what we see today with popular transport service. So it's that kind of balance that you have to look for. What do you want to provide both for the user and for the operator? And the people working within those popular transport services also require and they also deserve decent living conditions. So that's why I meant more philosophical. But Elena, go ahead.
That's part
Yeah.
of, yeah.
No.
Right now, a lot of these questions are very philosophical. Go ahead, Elena.
No, what I was thinking is that maybe, and I think the importance of this research is to collect data, to also generate conversations with governments in order to start to talking with the operators in order to improve their working conditions from a rights perspective, because they are very vulnerable populations and they still need to improve their working conditions, and also that will help to the users of this kind of mode of transport. So yeah, I think that's part of the importance of this research.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And I think what you're mentioning is part of the core reason why PRISM exists, which is generating data on the sector so that we can have more knowledge-based conversations rather than just perceptions and fears. And usually there's a lot of fear of the unknown, and decision makers and authorities usually don't have a lot of information about the sector. So it's really hard to approach them to try to regulate, to negotiate if they have no idea how it runs or where they are or who they're serving or why people use this and how we could start thinking about merging them. So thanks for that. We usually do breakout groups to, again, know each other, because right now it's just listening to CPSU. But before we go to that, I just wanted to open up the floor to see if anyone else has any questions for Arturo and Elena that have not been addressed by the conversation or in the chat. Roger, I see you open your mic.
I just,
Go ahead.
this relates to, I think, what Arturo was saying about Uber and other similar services. It sounds like they exist in San Jose, but they're not very widely used. So, I mean, today, let's say we have the regular taxis, we have the informal transport taxis, and then we have the Ubers of the world. I mean, which are getting the dominant share of usage by people who want, just sort of door-to-door transportation.
In that area, another thing that we have been told, but not necessarily confirmed as well, is Ubers don't tend to go that deep into that community because they don't want to risk it. So in the end, the people that are operating within those high-risk communities are people from the community that know each other, that pay the fee to go in, and those kind of more violent-related aspects that, again, popular transport and transport itself is very different all around the world and different within the communities. For example, what we see in Pavas, we might not see in a community that is 7 kilometers away, but has similar conditions as Pavas. So I think that's another thing that makes, or another reason that makes popular transport irreplaceable, I would say, when it comes to operating in high-risk communities, because it's operated by people from those communities and not as a business, not as a, well, it is a business kind of, but it's more of satisfying the people's needs and probably satisfying their own needs in the process, because they saw an opportunity that people weren't really taking advantage of, and that they saw that niche and they decided to provide a service for the community, and it's still going. in the end.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. It's interesting, I think it's city to city, because here in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, which is probably over 1 million people, taxis won't go there. But once Uber entered the market, there was lots of people, lots of Uber drivers, and I don't know whether they were mostly living in that part of the area or elsewhere, who went there. And what used to be a ridiculous situation, you couldn't even get there, now has been remedied by the fact that Uber's in the market. So like you say, it's very local in terms of how these things play themselves out.
Exactly. And I think examples like that are present in pretty much every community in every city in the world.
Right.
So
Ariana?
Hussein,
Oh,
Ariana.
Yeah. Hi. You want to go, Ariana? You can go if you want first.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Yeah. Hi, Arturo. My name is Hussein, and I'm working with Prism as a part of Columbia University. I'm an urban planning student, and I'm also looking at a similar case. My focus is around Mumbai, and I will be looking at a similar case of popular transport for my thesis. So, the question that I had given about asked about the climate adaptation, my focus is more on that aspect also. But here, talking about San Jose and the work that you are doing, and the factors that you mentioned, the environment in which the popular transport is operating here, the question I wanted to understand is that given the particular scenario here and the conditions, I mean, certain areas where the other formalized modes won't operate, given the security concerns as well, uh, how often does the research covers like the operations of popular transport in hours other than the regular, like the day hours? Apart from that, how it operates at night, because also some formal modes of transport might not be operating like past 12 o'clock at night. So does that give this mode of transport an edge as compared to the other modes of transport? But given the context here is that it's a bit unsafe, where Uber also won't go usually, do these people get an advantage in that sense? Do they, because also affordability, as you mentioned, that some cases they charge more than the public transport. So how does it play in this environment basically?
Excellent question. And that's something that Andrea covered it in her research in the Caribbean coast, because yes, public transport services stop at certain time of the day. But what happens with the people that are in the night economy? And I have an experience specifically with a person that lives in the community that we're analyzing when I was working as a bartender several years ago. And we used to close the bar at 2 a.m., 2:30. And at that time, it was about 12 years ago or something like that. During that time, there were popular transport services that were hourly until the last went out of San Jose at 3 in the morning. So because public bus services operate from 4 in the morning until the last services go out at 10, so they finish at 11 the operations. So between 11 at night and 4 in the morning, there are no transport services, or at least mass transport services, to cover the demand. This guy was taking the minibus to get back to his place at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning. He tried to go out at 2 in the morning because the 3 a.m. bus was the last one, and that was normally full. So again, it's a matter of access to people that don't really have it. And probably if not, he would either had to walk, which was a long walk, probably about 5 kilometers or so. And at that time of the day, it's not necessarily the safest way to get back, or rely on someone to take him. I had to take him a couple of times because we finished late. And yeah, it was that kind of thing. And taxi services were not going to take him there, or at least not as far as he needed. They would probably have left him within the entrance of the community rather than the mid part of the community where he was living. And it's those kind of things. It's definitely unequal access for people. And these services really cover up most of the inequalities because they themselves come probably from unequal let's say, unequal conditions, and they themselves are vulnerable. So it's, as Elena was mentioning, a more familiar service that might be provided, and people eventually tend to trust themselves by creating this network of services that are, let's say, life-saving in a lot of the occasions, and that they provide access to, again, jobs that they might not be able to have if they weren't for these types of services.
Yeah, I mean that puts spotlight on the sense that I was also trying to make, and it was, the question was also coming from a personal experience, because the last 10 years of my life I was living in an administrative capital which had like a working population, but there were also residents like and students like me who were living in a administrative town in India called Gandhinagar. It was basically like government offices were there, so after 7 p.m. all the offices were empty, but the students like us who used to live in hostel, we needed some sort of transportation. Say for example, if I was traveling to Mumbai and I had to catch a flight from like that town to Ahmedabad airport, I was not able to, like, even let alone like vulnerable or unsafe areas, that was a different question. But even in like formal areas like these, because there were no formal modes of transport and even Uber wouldn't service in those internal areas, it was very difficult for me to like wait for any like shuttle service or anything that was there, like even informally operated, for me to take me from that point to the airport that was there. So yeah, it actually is sort of a missing link between these things.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
We have Ariana and then Ernest. Since we are flexible and agile like popular transport, I'm gonna let go of the breakout groups and keep this conversation going, because I think it's flowing quite nicely, and that's actually the purpose of these meet and greets. So Ariana, go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you. So I know you are still studying this, but regarding, as you mentioned, the importance of diversity when we look at the collective cabs, is there diversity within the collective cabs, in the sense that are there some these individual vehicles, I don't know, owners, for example, or people who rent it, that only go and take several people? So they go, let's say, like they follow the route of the minivan. Is there a difference between those and the other ones that might work as like a call or a WhatsApp, like this more contact based? Oh, my neighbor needs transport, I'll take the car out. So do they all provide both services? And am I asking this also because that maybe there's a difference here in the terms of ties that they have with the community, like more one-to-one versus more this is my mini enterprise, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Elena, I'm not sure if you want to take the first part of the question and then I complement.
Yeah, I think that from what we have seen, the cabs could be more like a one-on-one relationship between the community and the popular operators. You know, like, since they are smaller, it's easy to contact them and they will be in front of your house. But maybe the minibuses are more like another type of official bus, like, you know, like they go from the bus station in San Jose to the final stop in Palace. So I will say that that's like the dynamic that we have seen. But yeah, I don't know, Arturo, if you can, if you want to say something more.
And from the automobiles in general, we have seen both behaviors, both operating as collective taxis, probably, and we don't have any data for this, but I would try to make a logic argument that is that perhaps collective taxis operate more in the context of peak times rather than non-peak times, since they can make a better use of the vehicle and can gain more from having 4 people go into the same area rather than just operating within the community on a one-to-one service. And yes, they do have, let's say, there are operators that are, and from the one that we talked about, specifically this type of vehicle, we have spoken to one person, and it was that he had his phone number, and people just called him, hey, can you take me to this place, or can you help me bring some of the food that I have already paid for from the supermarket? And they can provide services that go beyond passenger transport, but also goods transport in some kind of way. So they are diverse in that sense, but we didn't really ask him if he was only a individual, let's say he only took individual requests, or if he also operated with that collective taxi framework. So that's something that we can ask in the interviews that we will do in the future.
Great, thanks. And I think we have time for one last question. So Ernest, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you, Arturo. Thank you, Lena, for the insightful talk. I was just curious to pick your thoughts on the challenges you faced as researchers and how you have successfully managed to navigate that landmine. So I see, for instance, I listened to you, you talk about the fact that there seems to be this cat and mouse game between the operators and the officials, the police on the one side. And then it's, again, you have criminal bosses who also handle, if like the underworld. And so I'm just imagining if you are seen to be spending more time talking with the official governments or the police, chances are that you may make enemies for yourself on the other side of the street. If you are seen making more contact with the other side, you'll be seen as legitimizing an illegality. I'm not sure how you've successfully been able to break this. It's a landmine, I think.
Yeah, I think, again, as I mentioned before about the authorities, if we weren't doing this research, it would still exist and they would still do nothing about it. So they have had a really cautious approach, and they don't really want to create more violence in an already violent community. So I think their approach is helpful, definitely, for the overall safety of the community. It's not helpful in terms of what are you going to try to do to, and I would say improve, but improve sometimes depends on the side that you see it from, on how you impact the community. And again, not doing anything apparently has been relatively better than doing what they had done before. And I'm not exactly, they won't replicate what they're doing now, but I think it's a trial and error kind of thing, with, let's say, minimizing the errors that you can cause. But from our approach into trying to talk to the, let's say, to the operator perspective, it has been difficult, even with the users themselves. In the end, talking to users in a conflictive area at night or during the afternoon or during peak travel times, it's always difficult. So we have tried several approaches. Some haven't worked as well as we thought they might have. For example, we went to a farmer's fair trying to get to the people to answer questions about the service, but people in a farmer's fair are buying fruits or buying vegetables. They're not in the mood of answering questions. So we've had to reformulate our approaches several times. And as Elena was mentioning about the ones that we started yesterday, and Carla, our other colleague, she said that they were sitting there, and Elena, you can compliment afterwards, they were sitting there and sometimes they were feeling a bit observed that, okay, these people are doing something weird here, and we have to take a bit of caution when we go to places and they start seeing us. Our approach was, we go there, they see us, they might at some time come to us and we can talk to them. But apparently that didn't work out exactly as planned. Elena, go ahead and you can expand on it.
Yeah, it's totally like that. Like we were there, like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 hours, well, in different points, and we felt observed. And we also saw the same driver passing by us several times. So we already know that they know each other by now. And I think that's something important is that we have these interviews by reference. And it's something that the Bogota teams told us that is very important, especially in this kind of environments. And also from a gender perspective, I will say that it's a very masculinized environment. So the next time that we are planning to do this observation, I think it will be nice, and it's important that another colleagues come with us, because yesterday we were just only Carla and I. So I think that it's important to have this into account when everyone is doing this kind of observations in the field. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for all the really insightful questions. Maybe just food for thought for everyone who's here, because this was something that we were going to suggest for the breakout groups. Part of the motivation of doing these meet and greets and the past ones we've done is to learn from each other. And popular transport is very different everywhere, but there's always commonalities and things that we can learn from each other, either from how to collect data and how to approach the sector and how to take care in the way that we're collecting it, to, okay, I'm learning about how this policy works in this place and how decision makers might be able to incorporate these services into their planning, etc. So as food for thought, just maybe things that you can think about is what things were insightful for you from this presentation, and that you can take back to your context, and also think about what also resonates, that you're like, I had no idea this was happening in Costa Rica. This is also happening in my context and I can learn from it. So anything that you would like to share with us afterwards, we would love to hear about. And we're gonna have more meet and greets in the future. As I mentioned before, we have one coming up in December, which is with Bangkok. Bangkok is also doing a lot of work specifically with 2- and 3-wheelers. They're doing really interesting work there. So if you're interested in that topic, please keep your eye open. On a side note, on 2- and 3-wheelers, we're also working on developing a resource hub in GMPT on 2- and 3-wheelers, talking about road safety, electrification, safety and security, equity and inclusion, and also the economics of the sector. So we're going to do a launch hopefully before the end of the year on this. And so we will have certain explainers and resources on this topic. And if you have not subscribed to the newsletter, in the newsletter on GMPT, we have news about what's going on in the different living labs. Beyond the meet and greets, you will also know if they've published something, if they've run a workshop, what's going on in these different places. And you can also get in touch with the living labs if you want to collaborate, if you have any ideas, or would want to get in touch for any other reason. So thank you so much again for your time. And we will continue to hold these spaces for our network. Invite your friends, and hopefully next time we'll have even more discussion amongst us. But I think it's been a wonderful space to learn a bit more about what's going on in Costa Rica. And the questions that you have all raised are really interesting because it can take us to so many other different topics. Arturo?
No, and I just wanted to say to feel free to reach out to us if you have any other question, any input that you want to give us, which is always well received from our side. And if you want to learn a little bit more on what we're doing and what we plan to do. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, and part of the spirit of PRISM is there's a consortium with different living labs already existing, but part of the spirit is to collaborate with even more actors around the world. And so if you're interested in being part of the consortium, in building alliances, in collaborating somehow, please also reach out to us. Here are Elena and Arturo's emails. You can reach out to us in GMPT or with Ariana or Hussein, or also there was someone else around here from PRISM, but yeah, we're all open to, this is a network, and the idea of networks is that we can, any effort that we want to do, it's much better if we do it as a group and if we collaborate with each other rather than trying to do it alone. So that's the spirit of these spaces. So thanks so much, and hopefully we'll see everyone again in December and to talk and learn more about Bangkok. Have great days and nights, and thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Arturo. Thank you, Elena.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.